All right. Hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about the impact of good open source on a self-taught developer. I hope to share some of the knowledge I've gained ever since I started contributing to open source and share with you the tremendous growth that you can get from working on open source. So let's jump right in. So a bit about myself. So I like to refer to myself as a self-taught developer. I like using Golang, Python, and JavaScript. Those are stacks I work with mainly. And I discovered a passion for open source, I think, last year in July. And I've never looked back. I've been working on open source projects ever since. In my free time, I'm out playing football with friends. For those in the scholarship program, my Slack handle is Alan Today. Yeah, that last name is a bit hard, and then if you want to find me on Twitter, that's my handle as well. Okay, so when I finished school, I didn't really want to do what I had studied. I studied petroleum geosciences. What I wanted to do was to do software. I'd been writing a few amateur code here and there as I was studying in college, but after school I realized, oh, this is what I really want to do. So like any other self-taught developer, I started watching YouTube videos and a few tutorials. After that, I wasn't really gaining any experience. I don't know, for any self-taught developer, I think the hardest thing to prove is that you can actually do something because you haven't worked for someone, and most of the skill you've gotten has been off videos on the internet, and so it's really hard to prove, and it's really hard to gain that experience that you would normally get if you are working on a team and you have maybe mentors, and they're transferring all that knowledge to you. So it was really, really hard, and even a couple of boot camps didn't really help me. So the problem with tutorials is, yes, you're going to get a lot of knowledge from watching all these things that you're interested in a certain stack. You're going to go and watch a video, and you'll have knowledge about it, and then you'll find something interesting, you'll watch it, find something interesting, you'll watch it. And the reason I'm sharing this image is because it says everything about the journey of a self-taught developer. At some point you're going to acquire knowledge, but you won't really know how to connect the dots. You won't really know. You haven't pushed code to production. You don't know how it could fail. You don't know what happens if you have a certain amount of users hitting, the application. You don't know anything about a system architecture for really big, applications that have like really scaled out, and so you're not aware of all these nuances that can happen when code is in production. And if you're a self-taught developer and it's really hard to get a job, the best option would be to start with open source. You're going to have to find an open source project, and later I'll share with you how to really select one that is really good, and then you start from there. You start solving all these problems, and then you start getting all these epiphanies. Oh, I didn't really know this. Oh yeah, someone in the tutorial maybe mentioned this, but oh, I didn't really know this is how It could be altered and then used in production. So you're going to start connecting dots as you work in open source. There's a famous person, I think, in the React community, Ken C. Dodds, and on one of his blogs, this is what he wrote. So if you could just take time and just read that, I'll just give like a few seconds. All right. So what he really meant by this is you could get experience from, rather, experience is not only about the number of years you've worked in an industry. It could be you can get experience in just a few months by just working on relevant problems, problems that are really faced in the development world, problems that are really hard, and just you tackling them, you're going to get all this amount of knowledge. When you work on an issue, you're going to go and do a lot of research and read about, what that issue maybe requires for you to implement it, and in so doing, you're getting all this knowledge and experience. And in such a short time, you're going to really be knowledgeable at the same time, and you're going to have connected so many dots, and I feel you're going to get all that experience. Okay, so how do you identify good open source projects to contribute to? So a lot of the time, so open source it's really hard to identify a really good project, and I think I've worked on 3 open source projects, and one of them was not really, the maintainers were not really kind people. I witnessed a contributor who got really discouraged after they made their first contribution because one of the core maintainers was really rude, and he eventually left. So as a person who is starting out, or as a junior developer, how would you really identify a very good open source project for you to work on? So the first thing is you need to identify the skill you want to gain. This could be in terms of stacks. So if you're learning Python, tutorials are not going to, watching only tutorials or building projects alone in your bedroom or wherever is not really going to help you gain industry standard experience. What do I mean by this? I mean good software is built by teams. Good software has certain ways, it has certain processes it goes through. So working on a team, reviewing code as a team, and then you have testing and all that. Those can be really hard to do if you're working on a personal project that you don't even have a lot of knowledge about how to implement certain things. So identify the skill you want, and then another thing is open source is not only about writing code. So you could want to do, some people actually just come and do things like documentation. So open source projects, as you know, because they're out there and they're open and you're getting all these eyeballs looking at the code, they're going to need really good documentation. So that's another way of contributing to open source. And it would also require you to actually understand some of the nitty-gritties that are going on and how the whole project is set up, and for you to write very good documentation. So that's another way you could contribute. It's not only about the code. You also have to look out for projects that have sort of a community, and that community has to have like a means of communication. So either they can be using chat apps like Mattermost or Slack, and there are certain channels that are dedicated to helping out contributors, or where contributors can easily interact with our core staff, or the maintainers, ask them questions, so those are the kind of projects you want. Also look out for projects that have an organized way of contributing. So code of conduct, other issues really organized in such a way that it's easy for developers to come in and hit the ground and start contributing. Another thing about open source is that can really be discouraging is that point of the starting point. How do I set up my developer environment? So you have to look out for projects that are well documented in terms of you setting up your developer environment and starting to play with the application and maybe making some changes here and there. So look out for projects that have good code of conduct, because this is very important. I mentioned earlier about a maintainer that was really rude to a contributor. So the code of conduct is something that has to be signed, and if it's not there, then that's where you're going to get such things. Properly labeled issues. This is very, very, very important, because everyone that comes to open source, so just like myself, or even anyone, because when you're new to code, you have to read through and you may not understand everything. So labeling, so where issues are really labeled with badges like good first issue. So good first issues are usually issues where it's not so, the code won't be so much. The problem is also easily understood. And then as you're doing it, you're also reading through the code and you're getting, small bits of information here and there, and you're getting an understanding. You'll also find labels such as easy, hard. So hard is when maybe you've been on the project for some months and now you understand how everything comes together and you can take on hard. So in this case, hard may not even mean hard in terms of it's really hard to implement or it is something that everyone cannot understand, but it means hard in terms of for a contributor with maybe a certain level of information, they may not be able to understand this, but for another contributor who has been here for some time, certain level of information, the hardness, then it's not really hard, but it's relative, so depending on how much information you have. You also want projects where the reviews are really kind. You don't want your confidence, blown out, lowered because maybe maybe you've written certain code and maybe it's not really how they really wanted it, and then someone really, shuts you up and maybe closes your PR even. So you don't want such. You also want projects where reviews come in really fast, and because imagine if you make a contribution and then a review comes in 4 months later, you've probably even been discouraged and forgotten what you really wrote. So that's how you can identify a really good open source project to work on. So the thing about open source is that you're going to get all this experience, you're going to meet, you're going to be able to work on teams, you're going to get really knowledgeable, you have a community, and your confidence is really going to go up knowing that you're working on a project that is impacting, if it's a really huge open source project that is impacting several people, and they're all using your code. So that is really good for your confidence. And I also feel for someone who maybe is just starting out, it's also really good for your CV. It can really get you interviews, and that's really, really important. All right, so I hope to see you in the AMAs in the Slack, and I hope this has been valuable to you. Thank you very much.